Alrighty, good afternoon. Sorry for the delay in getting this up. I'll explain in class, but I can explain here as well. Yesterday, just a lot of things happened. I had to take my wife to an appointment, had to take my dog to an appointment. I had a meeting. The weather's been a lot hotter lately, and you may or may not know this. Babies are very finicky when it comes to temperature, so I had to install an air conditioner unit and things like that. So, long story short, the day got away from me, so I apologize getting this up a little bit later than I intended. But it happens. It's okay. We're going to do it now. We're going to go for 10 to 15 minutes, just depending on how things go. And then you'll have an ed puzzle. I'll try and make it multiple choice. That's mostly going to make the grading easier for me, but also make it easier for you to take it as well. But anyways, we can sort of fill the gaps. Again, I've posted your quiz. You'll have until tomorrow. Sorry it wasn't earlier than that. But again, today's asynchronous. We'll talk about it. All the notes that you need are on the quiz itself. There's one short answer question. Everything else is either multiple choice, true, false. There is one select more than one answer, but again, open note should be easy to do. And then we can kind of say that we've covered the lower Middle Ages. Really, the big things to take away is the church is trying to reform itself, doing a very bad job at it. The church and state are infighting a lot about who's going to have more power in Western Europe. Again, in Eastern Europe, the Byzantium Empire is clearly in charge. It runs the game. And again, it's sort of peak Byzantium time period between 800 to about 1000 or so, around there. I mean, they were pretty good starting in the 400s as well, but about 400 to about 1000. So the 600-year period, like they are the power player in the region. We just don't have any time to spend on that particular region, and that we're mostly focusing on Western Europe. So yeah, but anyways, all that long convolutedness is again the lower Middle Ages. Again, is really the 890s, 889 till about the 1200s or so. And so again, the Crusades, Avignon Papacy, Western Schism types of religious order. This is sort of what was going on historically. Some has to do with the church. Again, other were big sort of just events. Again, this particular time period, really starting from about the 500s, really till about the 1500s or so. Again, the church and state and really the church in terms of progressing history forward are pretty inseparable. So again, a lot of this will be very much around the church, but again, that's just kind of the way that time period worked. So think of this sort of as the similar presentation to we did the first 7 ecumenical councils and then a little bit of a history lesson. We did the next set, a little bit of a history lesson, and then after that, it will just sort of kind of all come together because Protestant Reformation and all that other stuff. The next unit that we're going to cover, history and everything sort of mixed together. Anyways, let's go ahead and get started. So again, this covers the Crusades, which takes place 1096 is the first one, right? Avignon Papacy and the Western Schism. We'll talk about that. All this is going on around this time period. Again, the church is trying to reform itself. It's trying to be better. It's just not being very successful because power comes with a lot of trappings, and the church didn't sort of rein itself in, so to speak. All right. So what's the deal with the Crusades? Having 2 popes, sometimes 3 popes, and religious orders. All right. So what you will learn by the end of the presentation, which we won't get through all of the presentation today. I'll continue this presentation a little bit later on over the weekend. But some of the things you're going to learn are the reasons for the Crusades, what led to being 2 popes and sometimes 3 popes, and then different religious orders, their backgrounds and charism, just to kind of give you a sense of what was going on historically at the time. All right, you should by the end be able to distinguish between 2 religious orders, discuss the importance of not having 2 popes, and discuss the church as being truly one holy Catholic and apostolic during the Crusades. Again, this is in the Nicene Creed. We'll touch on that here in a little bit. The First Crusade, again, takes place 1096 to 1099. So again, if you're thinking about the lower Middle Ages, the lower Middle Ages have been going on for a couple hundred years now. But again, this is when the church in the West is starting to flex a little bit of its might. The Byzantium Empire is starting to decrease in power just because it's being invaded a lot. The rise of Islam, as well as some of the steppe tribes. Again, we're talking your Mongolians and other nations. Again, they are looking at Byzantium. Again, Byzantium's just richer than the West at this point in time, but it's also like a big kingdom that's in the way between the West and The Far East, again, Islam and things of that nature. So again, they provide kind of a buffer, the Byzantium Empire, but again, because of that, they're constantly getting hammered, and because of our breaking in 1054, and again, sort of the lessening of ties and things like that, the West doesn't want to support them probably as well as they should, because they see themselves as enemies, which is definitely not true. But anyways, in the background of all this conversation that we just had is the First Crusade. All right. One of the reasons that Urban II called for the crusade was to protect Christians in the Holy Land. They were by far the minority. Again, at this point in time, Islam is the predominant religion of the Middle East, still is today. But again, a lot of pilgrims are going to the Holy Land to worship as a type of devotion. And the question is, do they really need protecting? The answer is no. Muslims were pretty darn nice to Christians, and they were pretty darn nice to Jewish people as well. Did you have to pay a little bit of a tax for not being Muslim? Yes. So a lot of people converted to Islam just to avoid paying a tax, but it wasn't like a wild, crazy tax or anything like that. So again, if you wanted to be a Christian, Islam considers you to be people of the book. Again, they don't consider Jesus Christ to be the Messiah, but they consider him to be very important. He's probably the number 2 prophet after Muhammad. So again, Islam is more than happy to protect Christianity. Pope Urban was trying to, again, give everyone sort of a rallying point. Again, there's a lot of infighting between what we would now call like modern day Germany and Italy and France and Spain is not really Spain as we think of today. It's still majorly controlled by the Moors, Islam, but again, there's a big segment that is still considered Christendom and things like that, and they're all just fighting with each other. And again, the Pope says, "Hey, what if we just kind of get everyone together, right? What if we give them a common enemy?" It's Islam, unfortunately, which is going to set a very bad precedent for the next 1,000 years. But again, it was really just sort of a big ploy to get everyone kind of on the same page. All right. So again, this makes the war justifiable and pleasing to the Lord that we're going to try and conquer it for Christendom. All right. Again, it didn't hurt that Urban II gave all those peoples who went to fight the Holy Land plenary indulgences. We've talked about, well, we've heard the word indulgence a lot. Plenary indulgence is an indulgence based off of action. So again, you could lessen your time in purgatory or someone else's time in purgatory based off of your action. This particular action is going to fight in the crusade. Again, going to fight in the crusade isn't an easy thing. Let's say you're in France. Let's say you're in southern France. All right, let's make the trip a little bit shorter. You still have to either get a boat if you're rich, probably sail around the coast because they still weren't very good at navigation at that point in time. The idea of going into open water was pretty foreign to Europeans at this particular time. So you still got to trace yourself around Italy and then Greece and then find your way to the Middle East. Or you had to walk the whole way and things like that. So again, the Pope is saying, because you're taking on such a great action, will lessen your time in purgatory. But this will set up some bad precedents down the line. All right, why might this be a problem later on? Again, eventually, instead of being an action, again, you had to walk, or you had to sail, or you had to invest time and money and resources to go to the Crusades to fight. You could just pay, and that's obviously no bueno. All right, this is a cute video. We're not going to watch it just because we're getting limited on time. But again, he's going to kind of go over all of the Crusades. There's debate on how many numbers there are. I'll share this Prezi when I post this video, so if you want to go in and watch it, it's very, very cute. It's from Horrible History. I know that some of you who have Mr. Egan may have watched some Horrible Histories, maybe not this one, but again, it's very informative and kind of funny, or kind of being a tragic thing. All right. So the First Crusade, if you watch the video, was a success. Success in that we reconquered Jerusalem, Antioch, some of the large cities of Christendom that you might have been familiar with or heard when we talked about early in the life of Christianity when the Roman Empire was still a thing. So we had them. We controlled them. The reason that we were able to do that, though, didn't have to do so much with our superiority militarily. It's the fact that the Muslims were very divided. There was different factions. They were fighting among themselves, so we kind of caught them by surprise, and there was just a great deal of fervor, and again, we thought we were brought on by God, and that sort of like adrenaline rush really kind of allowed Christianity to conquer the day. All right. The first Crusades was just sort of a general movement. This one was led by kings. All right, so Islam had sort of regrouped, gotten back together, and said, "We're going to reconquer these cities. They're cities for Islam because they are important in Islam as well." They weren't doing it just to get back. Again, they had religious reasons behind their settlement in those places as well, but they got together. They had reconvened. They said, let's put our differences aside. We have a common enemy, Christianity. Again, not really helping relationships and things like that. And then they reconquered all the territory that the Christians had conquered the first time around. All right. Again, the lead up to Crusade had to do with the fall of Edessa, one of the kingdoms established during the First Crusade. It was small, sparsely populated. Again, once we conquered it, we figured we're good to go. Islam's going to leave us alone. We can kind of do whatever we want, and that's just poor planning and foresight. So the Pope calls for a new one. The kings of France and Germany decide to lead the charge. Again, that's great, but again, France and Germany don't like each other. Germany's standing the Holy Roman Emperor. They're fighting over land and things like that. I mean, it's really the idea of too many cooks in the kitchen. They just can't get along. They can't get their troops on the same page. Again, this led to problems, especially in Damascus, where the Christians were finally defeated. So again, in the First Crusade, Christianity was unified. Islam was divided, so we were able to defeat them. This time, Islam is unified. Christianity is very divided, so it was very easy for the Muslims to defeat us. So again, this is a huge defeat to morale in Europe and our idea of greatness, that again, we're Christians and God's on our side and all that other stuff, no longer seems to be the case. All right, and here's another video that you can watch. Again, it's a little more historical and accurate. The Third Crusade, this is the Crusade of Kings, sometimes called the King's Crusade. You have the Holy Roman Emperor, today what would be modern-day Germany, the King of France, and the King of England all volunteered to lead the charge. So why do we need to try the third time? Well, the Muslims were united under Saladin and able to reconquer Jerusalem. Again, we just wanted to get in there. The Crusade originally was supposed to conquer Egypt. Again, Egypt is primarily Muslim, still is today. But again, it's rich in natural resources, barley and grain and cotton and all that. I mean, again, as you remember from ancient Egyptian days, like Egypt was the kingdom. It was very, very rich and powerful. Still is during this particular time. It still is today. Economically very rich and things like that. A little dependent on agriculture, but again, they got a lot of water, so that's okay to do. So they wanted to conquer there. That didn't work out, so they decided to conquer Jerusalem. Again, what happened with the kings last time, same thing happens here. Philip even tries to take Richard's land. It's in France. There's a lot of like marriage. Again, William the Conqueror, again, 1066. Again, there's a lot of people in England that still own land in France because they're literally from France and all that. Again, it's just a disaster. All right. Frederick dies on the way there. He actually drowns. Needless to say, a lot of infighting between the kings. But Richard the Lionheart, that's the king of England. Again, you're probably familiar with Richard II, Richard the Lionheart. He was the king during Robin Hood times, right? He was undefeated, so Saladin was never able to defeat him in battle. But again, Richard could never take advantage of that. He could never beat Saladin either. So it was a stalemate. So basically what happened was that Muslims said, if Christians decide to come, we're not going to harass them. We're going to protect them. So really, basically before the First Crusade, everything that was going on before is sort of reestablished. All right, and then the Fourth Crusade, this will be the last one that we discuss. This will be it for today. We don't even make it to the Holy Land. Long short of this crusade, it was a political crusade much more than a religious crusade. The original idea was France and Venice would work together to conquer Egypt, right? Again, Egypt, powerful, lots of money there, still controlled by Islam at the time, but we want the natural resources, but they ran out of money. So a savior emerges, an emperor of Constantinople who has been couped or kicked out, says, if you get me back onto the throne of Constantinople, I'll pay for the entire crusade. So we say, great, sure, we can do that. So instead of going to Egypt, we go to Constantinople. We agree, we get the emperor his throne back, and then he says, well, I appreciate it, but I'm not going to pay. Okay, that's not really a good idea. So the Crusaders shut out, got no money. They can't leave because they don't have any money to pay for the ships. So they decide to sack the city of Constantinople. They insert a king. Technically, the East and the West are reunited because, again, it's under the Pope. The king demands his leadership and things like that. But this is basically the end of the Byzantium Empire. Had to do with Christians sacking the city. This is in the 1200s. It will limp through time for another couple hundred years or so, but really, the Emperor of Byzantium is now basically a city. They don't have any large lands or anything like that. It just ends poorly. Again, there's a bunch of crusades after that. They're not that great. But again, it did establish new trade routes. We got more into education. We learned about like Aristotle and Socrates and astronomy because Muslim scholars have been rocking that for several hundred years. Again, you get spices and all that other stuff. And again, it just sort of opens up the West to a world outside of the West. Again, they spent so much time fighting each other that they didn't really explore. Now they're actually exploring and seeing where spices are coming from. And again, this will actually propel Portugal and Spain in the late 1400s to, again, how can we cut out the middleman, Venice and the Middle East and, all those places and get the spices directly and things like that. So it'll actually propel the West forward and all that other good stuff. Anyways, I'm very much over my time. You'll have some questions to go along with this. If you have any questions, comments, concerns, insults, let me know, and I will see everyone. I'll see everybody soon, one way or another.